and welcome to another episode of Fun Facts at the Pharmacy. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Greider. It's the first time you're watching this show. I am actually a pharmacist who works for the Mark's Pharmacy chain located here in Northeast Ohio. So if you ever stop at one of the Mark's stores, there's a possibility you could see me there. The purpose of the show is to simply give people advice and information about different health concerns, disease states, kind of keep you guys up to date with what's going on in the current world right now. So with that being the case, for our beginning segment, we normally do like a fast acting thing where we focus on maybe something in particular. But as of right now, if you've watched any of the previous episodes, the biggest issue right now is the global pandemic. So it's essentially COVID-19 that's going on right now. At the time of this recording, the big thing that we're going to kind of focus on is the fact that booster shots has been a big thing. So we've had a lot of questions at my pharmacy about like who's qualifying, what to expect from it, who should come in and do what at this time. So the big thing that we're looking at right now is the FDA and the CDC have recently approved a booster vaccine for the most of the general population. Does not apply to every single person out there right now, but we're focusing mostly on the age groups of 65 and older does qualify, and then 18 to 64. They're looking more so at people that have either different disease conditions that put you at a higher chance of getting an infection. So we're looking mostly at things like type 1, type 2 diabetes, asthma, COPD, if you've had any kind of history of like severe like blood pressure issues in regards to like heart attacks, strokes, anything along those lines. These are the people that would actually qualify for a booster shot. Though it's not required, they do recommend it for those people. The reason being is that it's only focused on the Pfizer vaccine at this time. It could change at the time of the recording here, so within the next few weeks from when we're doing this right now. The Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are looking to possibly get approvals for booster vaccines as well. But at this time, it's only focused on Pfizer, and it has to be 6 months after your second shot. So if you did get your vaccines completed, which is great, we need you to wait at least 6 months before you'd even consider looking at that for the most part. So. Most people that qualify also fall into a category of high risk. So we're talking about anybody that had the Pfizer vaccine. If you work in facilities such as like healthcare, firefighter, police officers, where you're constantly dealing with the general population, and even grocery workers, they actually said fall into this category, you would also qualify that you may require a booster shot. The nice thing with the Pfizer shot is essentially it's a third shot, so it's no different than the first two that you had received. Most people, when they ask questions in regards to any kind of side effects or issues that they might experience, the third shot's kind of similar to the second shot. So with that being the case, if you didn't really experience much on your second dose, I'll be honest with you, your third dose may not actually do anything for you. It does provide the booster though, because they did find that with that vaccine, it did drop its effectiveness over time by about up to 15%. In order for people to kind of get that extra protection up to the 90s again, they do ask that people get that third shot done. This can be completed at any facility that has it available. So when we first started doing them all the way back in January, December, January, the hard part was you kind of had whatever vaccine was given to you. So for us at my store, we were only able to do the Moderna vaccine at the time, but most places now have both the Moderna and Pfizer available. So if you did get it done somewhere else, but you would prefer to stick with a particular pharmacy or a doctor's office, you're more than welcome to go there if they have the same shot available. I've had questions about intermixing the vaccines right now with booster vax. I would not worry about that right now. If you've gotten one, stick with the same thing as their recommendation right now. So we don't want to try and mix anything because there's not enough data and information. A lot of other countries have had to do a lot of mixing with different vaccines. The hard part on that is that we haven't gotten a lot of information back from them in regards to how people are handling it or if it's really showing any difference in effectiveness. So at this time, we have to follow the guidelines that the CDC recommends. And that says stay with the same vaccine. So if you got Moderna to begin with, just be patient. It may change or update, and same with Johnson & Johnson. But if you did get the Pfizer and you do fall within those categories I had mentioned, you would qualify to go ahead and get a vaccine completed. Just stop it and you can either ask, but most places are going to start requiring scheduling right now again, just so that it prevents 50 or 60 people stopping into the pharmacy at one time. We don't want that many people congregated to begin with if we can avoid it, but it also takes a little bit of the workload off of us at the time because we can't exactly do a bunch of shots at once while maintaining our normal script volumes and making sure everybody's safe. So with that being the case, just make sure you double check online, or you can sometimes contact the pharmacies nowadays to see if they have any scheduling available, and they should be able to handle that for you. So I do get some questions at my pharmacy that kind of hit on the main topic for today. So we're looking kind of at the idea of arthritis. I always have people that come up to my counters and say something about, hey, I've got this pain, it feels like it's arthritis. So the hard part about arthritis is we do need to break it down a little bit more into its separate categories because it does fall into two different categories. So we're going to focus a little bit more on osteoarthritis today. So to help me actually kind of talk about that a little bit, I do have a student with me from Neomed. His name is Carl. So if you'd like to say hi, Carl, go for it.
Yes, of course. My name is Carl. I am a Neomed student, like Chris said. I was born and raised on Long Island and then moved out to Ohio to attend Neomed. And then, now I just live with my fiance, her son, and my dog. And I'm with Chris teaching me all the ways about being a good pharmacist. So
awesome. So kind of diving into a little bit. So in general, like with arthritis, how would you describe or what would you define as arthritis exactly?
So the most basic way I would define arthritis, it would be inflammation of the joints. I mean, that's literally what the word arthritis means. And to go into a little more into that, it's a degenerative joint disease, and it's essentially a wear and tear disease of your low weight-bearing joints. So usually your knees, your hips, and then your hands are, and then sometimes your spine as well. And what we mean by a wear and tear disease is that the cartilage within the joints begins to break down. And as that cartilage breaks down, the cartilage acts like a buffer between the bones. So as since the cartilage is now being broken down and it's not there, the bones kind of rub up against each other, and it causes their shape to deform and change a little bit. It's very common in your hands, hips, and knees, like I stated, and then it's very prevalent in our population today, with majority of people with osteoarthritis being women, over about 62% of them. And 78% of individuals with osteoarthritis are non-Hispanic whites. And around the world, the direct cost of osteoarthritis is $65 billion. So it's a very, very expensive disease. Yeah.
I was just about to say, compared to most others, that sounds pretty expensive. So kind of focusing on that, because you kind of did break it down a little bit as to like what arthritis was and like osteoarthritis. There is another category. So I always have people that come up and ask questions because they'll say like, oh, I'm seeing this new drug in this commercial. So Humira, for example, is constantly talked about for like rheumatoid arthritis. So what makes, osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis different from one another?
So rheumatoid arthritis is different as it is an autoimmune disease. And what that means is your body immune system is attacking its own joints. And it's a very complex autoimmune disease, and the whole breakdown pathophysiology of the disease is not completely understood. But what we know is that essentially, for some reason, your immune system is telling the cells in your body to start breaking down the cartilage in your bones. Maybe it sees it as an infection, a foreign body, whatever. It's just telling you to do that. And that leads to then, the breakdown of that cartilage, then leads to some inflammation, as well as the bones rubbing up against each other, similar to osteoarthritis. But this one is more mediated by your immune system, whereas osteoarthritis is more of just overuse of the joint.
Okay. So kind of looking at that, I mean, for most people, would you say that osteoarthritis is more of just like over time situation than anything else?
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. A lot of people who do physical or manual labor for their career usually end up developing osteoarthritis just because those joints are being used so often, whether you're squatting to pick stuff up, or even working out a lot, or, just moving your hands and fingers, typing on a keyboard, that type of stuff. All that overuse can lead to some breakdown of the cartilage.
Okay. So if, say, somebody was coming up and they were just saying, I'm having these, pains or issues, what's a good way for people to kind of understand what they're looking for to see if they might possibly have something like osteoarthritis?
So normally the pain for each arthritis is located in different body parts. So in osteoarthritis, it's usually in your hand. It occurs in the top two joints of your fingers. Whereas rheumatoid arthritis usually occurs more on the bare knuckles on the bottom and down into the wrist area. And then, also another big difference is rheumatoid arthritis patients usually are very stiff in the morning, and that stiffness lasts for longer than about a half hour. Compares osteoarthritis, once they get up and get out of bed, that stiffness does seem to go away. So that's a big difference. And then the rheumatoid arthritis, you're going to see the presentation is symmetrical. And what that means is there's going to be the pain on both sides of the body. So it'll be the same joints in your left hand as your right hand, essentially. Whereas osteoarthritis, it could just be just your right knee instead of both knees. So that's one of the biggest differentiating factors between the two.
Okay, so we're looking more so like at like more of like where it's located and kind of like which side of the body that we're
Yes.
looking at. Okay, perfect. So with some people, what would be some major like risk factors? Like what are things that we're looking at that could potentially make it either worse for them or could come off that way for them?
So as you age, your risk of osteoarthritis does increase. And there's really no way to combat age. You know, whoever figures that out, they'll be a millionaire. So let me know. But yeah, so age is one of the biggest risk factors for osteoarthritis. Your weight as well. So the more weight that your joints have to deal with and bear every day, the more likely they are to break down. So that's why weight management is so key. And then just repetitive joint overuse or injury is a very key risk factor for osteoarthritis. So, you know, if you are doing like a job where you're bending down a lot and then standing back up or something like that, those joints just from doing it 100 times a day for 30, 40 years will break down eventually, and that will lead to osteoarthritis as well.
Gotcha. And I know it's always been mentioned too, one of the other things, and it's why, so one of the things you had mentioned was that women are more prone to have it, and they actually have found links that I thought were interesting in regards to postmenopausal.
Mm-hmm.
So with estrogen, it actually does provide like a protection against it, but because the hormones are so out of balance, women are actually more prone to getting it from that too. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
So in regards to dealing with osteoarthritis, what are some things that you think would help to kind of like manage it from a day-to-day standpoint?
So to help management, you really want to manage your weight to help decrease the bearings on your joints. And then really physical activity. You want to do some light to moderate physical activity. The current recommendation is about 150 minutes a week of light to moderate physical activity. That activity includes swimming, light walking, or even going on a light bike ride, going for a nice hike, stuff like that. And if even, that seems like it might be difficult to achieve doing that, just even if you're sitting on the couch watching TV and just curling soup cans and stuff like that, that will just help alleviate some of that stress as well.
Okay. And I know, would you say that like typically doing things in like pools, if you're comfortable with it, would be better for you just in regards to the joints?
Yes, definitely in the pools, just because there's a little less resistance being in the water. Your joints aren't having to deal with as much of the weight since the water kind of helps displace it a little bit. So definitely water aerobics is a great activity to help, alleviate some of the pain caused from osteoarthritis.
Awesome. So one of the purposes of the show essentially is like we want to make sure that people have a general idea on like how to go about handling it. So if you do have osteoarthritis or if there's any issues with it, so what are some things that people could possibly do that maybe don't require medications or anything like that to help them with it?
Well, that physical activity that I've mentioned is very helpful, as well as they do have like certain types of like cast and sleeves you can wear for like your wrist and stuff that can help alleviate some of that pain, as well as any type of extra movement you can do walking around the house, even while you're on the phone, parking a little farther from the store when you park there, that could help as well. Just stretching. Yoga has been shown to help people as well, help alleviate some of that pain. And then, just like kind of like activities, just staying active, but make sure you're not overexerting yourself as well.
Gotcha. I know some people have also mentioned a lot of the times like the copper bracelets and things like that, which can, on a weird note, some people have noticed the difference. I mean, there isn't a lot of information or studies out there that really show that, but there's no real harm or foul in using those. So if somebody wanted to try that, would you say that would be okay then?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be work for them. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So kind of looking at it right now, we do have medications that are out there that could potentially help. So when we're talking about like medications, what would we be looking at for you?
There's a whole bunch of medications, and they all look to help alleviate that pain. Some of your biggest ones is your Tylenol or acetaminophen, and then your ibuprofen, naproxens as well also show some help. And then there's like your topical NSAIDs, which would be like diclofenac or Voltaren gel, seems to work as well. And then you can get into your more prescription-based products, such as like duloxetine, tramadol. There's like cortisol injections you can go with as well that all seem to help alleviate some of the pain caused by osteoarthritis.
Okay. So yeah, the big thing with some of the medications, they all kind of do a little bit different. So with pain medications, I mean, we've had a previous episode before where we kind of talked a little bit about pain meds and what to look out for. Is there any particular thing with like how much somebody should be taking of some of these medications that we should be looking at?
Yes, there is definitely like dosing regimens you want to go with. So with like Tylenol, normally if you're going to start over the counter, you want to start with like 325 milligrams, the regular strength. Take it every 4 to 6 hours as you need it. And you want to make sure over a 24-hour period you don't go over 3,000 milligrams. Over the counter wise, your provider, if you see them, they might bump you up to a little higher dose than that, but that's okay since you're under their supervision. But you really want to limit it to the 3,000 there for the Tylenol. For like ibuprofen, you really want to limit it to about 3,000 milligrams as well. Technically, the exact amount is 3,200. And you want to divide that in between 3 or 4 doses as well, and really more on an as-needed basis. And then for naproxen, you really want to just take the 500 milligrams about twice a day, as needed as well, because that's the dosing limit for that one, and it does provide some pain relief as well.
Perfect. Now, with certain medications, so like you had mentioned one, for example, like duloxetine. So I know with duloxetine, it's the brand name Cymbalta with it, so in case anybody's curious at home about that. Most people normally know it more so for like depression purposes, like kind of like a mood medication. So in this case, like how do you think it would kind of help out somebody with that?
So when you take duloxetine at some of your lower doses, you do get some pain relief as well associated with it. So it's, the full mechanism of action isn't completely understood in that regard. Just seems to kind of like the receptors it works on, so the serotonin and norepinephrine, it does seem to, by inhibiting the reuptake of that, it helps to alleviate some of that pain signals going to your brain, and that will then alleviate the pain that you feel since, your brain's not getting those pain receptions.
Gotcha. Okay.
Pain signals.
Yeah. And then I do have some people, so one of the big things is narcotics. So people are always just saying like, oh, I need to be on these like narcotics and stuff like that. You had mentioned tramadol. Tramadol does technically fall into that category. How does that help a little bit different than the other ones there?
So tramadol is technically an opioid, like some of your big like ones that people have heard about, like your Percocets and that type of stuff. It's more of a more selective opioid, so it only works on one specific receptor. So it doesn't seem to be as like addictive and have those side effects, but it does provide some pretty good pain relief. It also works on similar receptors that duloxetine does as well to help provide some pain relief. So it kind of helps fight your pain, the feeling of pain in 2 different routes compared to most of our other options really only stop pain from one source.
Okay. So you get a little bit of a different type of pain relief than in that particular case. Okay. The other thing that we always look at too sometimes is that people will ask questions like, so I've heard, OsteoBioflex, for example, can help out. So, or glucosamine chondroitin's another big one that I always hear things about. Can you tell me just like a little bit about like how those help out people?
So those medications seem to help out. Data kind of is inconclusive about it, whether it helps or not. For some people, it shows a little help in helping to repair the joints and fix the joints. For other people, it might just be like the placebo effect. I mean, if you take it and you can afford it and it's going to help the pain, and your doctor obviously approves of it, then I say go for it because it's going to help. But it's something that if you try and it may not work, I wouldn't be too surprised by that. And then it's something you really just got to be in discussions with your provider or your pharmacist to really get the best regimen for your pains.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point, which is that some people do get a benefit and some don't. Because I know that one of the big things that they mention about it is that with OsteoBioflex and those things, it's essentially the cartilage, so that cushioning that's in between the joints right there. If that's completely gone, which for some people they may not notice it until it's gone, that stuff will not do anything for them. That's the hard part. So for us to be able to tell the difference there, that's one of the big things that I look out for. But if there is anything there, even like a sliver of it, it's sometimes enough that's why some people will get the benefit and some won't.
Okay.
So, I know you included like an image here as well, just to double check. So what's the picture that you have here for us?
So that picture that we have shows kind of the osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis presentations. So you'll see on the osteoarthritis like what joints that are more prevalent compared to rheumatoid arthritis. Like osteoarthritis, you might have, it could appear in your lower back, as well as maybe up in your neck as well, where rheumatoid arthritis doesn't really seem to impact those specific joints. And you'll see, as the picture shows, that the rheumatoid arthritis does show some symmetric, like on both sides of the body compared to osteoarthritis. And those are just, I believe this graphic's a great graphic to help kind of differentiate the diseases. It's something I found when I was studying in school for it, and I like bookmarked it and kept it with me because it's just a great reference to kind of get the basic understanding of the two disease states.
Gotcha. So yeah, just a kind of general wrap up there for it. So, well, thank you so much, Carl, for everything. This is great. We get a little bit better understanding of what's going on now.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. The big thing that I always like to stress to everybody and tell everybody is when we're talking about these different things, if you believe that you have anything that's going on with it, please talk to your physicians about it. Your practicing doctors are one of the best resources because their job is literally to diagnose any serious complications. Pharmacists and doctors and nurses are all there for the treatment part of it, but we are specially trained for treatment issues. One of the big things with disease states like this is it's very hard to tell what's going on with your body, that it may require additional imaging or other things like MRIs and x-rays to really tell what's going on with your body. So with that being the case, if you ever have questions, concerns, anything that you hear about this that you heard on the show, please ask your doctors or ask your pharmacist. We are gladly here to help you out just in case. It may be a little hectic or busy at the time, but we will do the best that we can there for you. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. We hope to see you here the next time on Fun Facts at the Pharmacy.